Here we are, another episode of The Goalpost.
And we both look really tired.
Yes, I think it's been. It's been a big weekend for me, so it sounds like it might be the same for you. So yes, so we're just going to go. I've got a few options. We've got a few topics to talk about, and we're just going to go until we run out of things to say. Basically,
All right, sure thing. Yeah, let's go with whatever you had in mind at first.
All right. Now, I'm going to talk about a school in Belgium, and I had erroneously initially thought it was in the Netherlands because they were speaking Dutch, but of course half of Belgium speaks Dutch.
Oh, sure.
So the school is in Belgium, but I'm going to have a go at pronouncing it. The name of the school is Koninklijke Anentheum. That's the name, Koninklijke Anentheum.
Okay.
Right. So it's been circulating on Twitter and possibly on Facebook a bit today over the last few days, actually, that on International Women's Day, this school in Belgium required boys to stand for the first hour, which I gather is the first class of the day. And this has been circulating quite a bit. It was because the original document was in Dutch. I had a little bit of a snoop around and was able to determine the name of the school. And thinking about it, I might actually reach out to them and ask for a comment on that, but I haven't done so yet.
Okay, yeah. 'Cause, as soon as you talked about the international, I knew exactly what you were talking about.
Yeah. And we've actually had a series of similar incidents in Australia, actually a couple of years ago. So interestingly enough, they probably weren't as well known, but we had one actually that was quite similar. Where the boys had to stand up and apologise to the girls. It wasn't for a particular length of time, but they actually had to stand up and apologise to the girls. So anyway, yes, I don't know if you've got any thoughts on this Belgium school that I probably won't have to pronounce again, hopefully.
I'm assuming Belgium's got. Would you say that it's more like a feminist sort of in culture right there, or is this something that the school is kind of unique for doing?
So that's a really good question. I don't know much about Belgium. I've never been there, but I've read a little bit about it over the years. I have a bit of an interest in, political theory and whatnot. At one point, interestingly enough, as a libertarian, you may be interested to know that this is going back maybe 10 years now. Belgium had quite a serious problem. So Belgium is divided between the Dutch-speaking community and the French-speaking community.
All right.
And I believe in the past, the French-speaking community was more prosperous than the Dutch-speaking community, but that's now reversed. And the Dutch-speaking community is now the prosperous group. Brussels is in the French-speaking area, I think, but is operated as a separate autonomous area. Anyway, they have this sort of relatively complicated system. I remember when I was reading about this a few years ago, where they have to kind of balance the interests of the two different groups and German-speaking minorities and so forth.
Sure.
Anyway, the government ended up in some sort of deadlock for quite a long time, about 10 months, where they couldn't form a new government, and there was obviously a government. The government was in caretaker mode. So basically there was some sort of vote of no confidence, and they ended up in caretaker mode. And as a libertarian, I thought you might be quite interested because some people actually raised this at the point. The Belgian economy did quite well during this period. The government wasn't able, in caretaker mode, as the convention in the English-speaking world says, you're not allowed to make new initiatives. They only respond to urgent situations. And if you do, you have to consult the opposition and all this sort of thing. And this is what the Belgian government was doing, which means they were doing very little because there were no sort of serious issues during those 10 months. And the economy just ticked along quite nicely. And I remember at the time, quite a number of libertarian groups pointed to this as like, oh, look, no government intervention. The country's doing. Hey, they're actually doing better than usual for a while.
Well, exactly. It doesn't matter where it is. Like, if there's no government interference in such things, people kind of find their own way. But one thing that comes immediately to mind is, in the United States, there's the occasional scare when there's like a government shutdown or something. Everybody kind of freaks out, the things that we're all going to go into some kind of chaos, but we never do. Right?
You're right.
In fact, the more government we have, the more regulation, more heavily regulated it is, the more prone to riots they tend to be. So that's a fairly funny part.
Yeah,
it's not tragic.
You're right. Actually, a bit of an aside, but you're right about the US government. I've watched it from outside, thinking, "Oh gosh, that doesn't sound very good." But in actual fact, you had about 4 of them at one point over a series of years.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, it was actually okay. It was kind of a pain for government employees, I guess, because their pay was delayed. But other than that, I think they eventually got fully compensated. But other than that, it seems to have, been okay.
Right. Well, to circle back to our school here, so it's this compelling anyone to do anything, because sometimes it's forcing them to stand up, sometimes it's them going on their knees, kind of like you've seen those pictures of men like on their knees to apologize to womankind or some horse shit like that, right? And sometimes it's wearing a shirt like the future is female.
And in actual fact, there was a group of men who were bowing down to some women at a festival a couple of years ago. Yep. We should probably need, actually, now I think about it, probably need a wiki for men page on that topic, actually, separately. Those sort of images will appear in the encyclopedia, but probably just a whole topic on that, actually.
What would we call the topic then? Like, because we're talking about different kinds of kowtowing to women.
Yeah, something like maybe kowtowing, something like that. Exactly. That's what I'm thinking. Yeah, because even though the actions are different, and of course, we talk about the mandatory aspect. But yeah, getting back to your original question about is that okay in Belgium? I've probably just about expended my knowledge of Belgium there. I honestly don't know. Well, if my sense is Belgium has probably got a fairly entrenched feminist country. Certainly in France, that is, I think, the case. And my suspicion is in French-speaking Belgium, it's also the case. This school, it's in the Dutch area, but it is. I noticed it was very close to Brussels, so it was close, very close to the border between the two regions. So maybe that has an effect too.
I see.
But actually, as an aside too, there's been during this period there was a discussion about whether Belgium would even survive, or one possibility is that the country of Belgium is divided up, and France just takes the French-speaking component, and the Netherlands just takes the Dutch-speaking component. But for the moment, they're still going. But anyway, so this school has gone ahead and done this, and as I will reach out to the school and ask them for a comment on this. It'd be interesting to see. I reach out to organisations like that quite a bit, and a surprising number of them do respond to me, actually.
Okay.
So it's interesting. So I don't know if we had any other thoughts on that school. That's what I was going to mention, the ones in Australia. So there was one school. I'm just actually going to look up the name. Yeah, won't be a moment. I should have prepped a little bit. I've actually got my browser there on that particular tab on a different wiki page that I'll be talking about down the road. But the school in question that I wanted to talk about is Brower College. There we go. So Brower College is it's a government secondary school in Australia, and that was the one that had the students stand up in a school assembly and apologise for their gender to the female students. Yes. And it caused quite a significant backlash among the parents, actually, and was national and even international news. But we did have a couple of other ones too. We had Como Secondary College. Now, what did they do? Oh, yes. So Como Secondary College, we had a series of about 3 of them over the space of about 3 or 4 months where schools were popping up where there were attacks on boys in one way or another. At Como Secondary College, a female school teacher stormed into the boys' changing room and accused them of being misogynistic for celebrating a sporting victory, which, of course, comes on to one topic that you were going to talk about.
Yep.
Go on.
Oh, basically the idea of women's sports even having like its own right to exist, really. because one thing that I was thinking about, I was having dinner with my wife one time, and the topic of sports came up, and women in sports, because we were in a restaurant and sometimes we'd play sports, so that inspired the discussion. And my wife doesn't watch. Well, I won't say doesn't watch. She watches a little bit, but doesn't really watch female sports at all, or at least thinks men's sports are better. And especially in something like gymnastics, she thinks men's gymnastics like absolutely shatter women's gymnastics because they're willing to do much more complicated things and more strength oriented things. Like I'm see, out of the two, I'm the one that's not the sports oriented person. She's more interested in the subject than I am. But I think it's like balancing on the handlebars. I forgot what that was called. Kind of like in midair. I think that was that kind of stuff is, and whereas women's sports are kind of turning into dance routines. Like I mean the gymnastics specifically. That's something that we both noticed. And but yeah, men's sports are simply much more competitive in that true sense, I think. And I've been wondering whether, men, sports, there's no such thing as men's sports. They're just sports, but which is like men, but women have been kind of intruding into this space that's ours, if that makes sense.
Well, it's actually interesting you mentioned about gymnastics because there are a lot of sports, of course, whether it's track and field or running or whatever, where both men and women essentially do the same activity, but obviously the men are operating at a higher level. And I think it makes sense that your wife would prefer that because they're the ones operating at the limit of human achievement, essentially. They're the ones doing better. But gymnastics is an interesting case, and I've thought about this over the years. Men's and women's gymnastics are quite different, as you know.
Yes.
And I've actually always kind of thought, I've always personally taken, not that I'm not particularly into sports either, but I've often taken the position they're kind of different sports in a sense and probably not easily comparable. And I've always suspected there were some people who probably preferred men's or preferred women's. So I actually find it interesting so you prefer the men's. I think your wife probably, she said she prefers the men's.
She's the one that prefers the men's, and that's completely understandable,
Yeah, that's interesting actually, because I had suspected that some people probably like the women's because of the dance routines, as you note. But as you say, the men's they're quite different with having to be or are being strength focused. My suspicion is a lot of the men, probably because they're quite strong, they may not be as flexible, and the moves that the women's would do wouldn't work with the men's. There's certainly no interest in the men doing those sorts of moves in gymnastics anyway.
Exactly. And another thing that comes to mind that we talked about is skating, ice skating, and there's reasons to watch women ice skating for their own particular appearance and everything like that. But in terms of skill, this is what I'm trying to recall exactly what my wife told me. It'll be nice if a female ice skater could do like quads or something like the spins. But with men, you're basically required to do it to be considered in the top competitive. Yeah, and she's just nuts about the men's ones, so it's pretty funny. And also, she's also fond of Japanese Little League, baseball. It's absolutely just it's much more fun, and I suppose it's exciting. Yeah, so.
Is that a kid's sport?
Just a youth sport. Yeah, right. Just Little League. So yeah.
Yes, there was that case some years ago of a national team in one sport. I don't recall the exact details. A national team in one sport being defeated by an under-15 boys team in the same sport. So
exactly.
So that may show some difference in the types of levels we're talking about. Now, I'd probably be remiss if I didn't mention the one sport where women actually do outdo men. It is actually endurance swimming. So whereas in pretty much every other sport, men maintain the titles, with the exception probably of gymnastics, where they're essentially different. And the difference is often, 10% or sometimes more in performance. The women actually maintain or have a lot of the titles in endurance swimming, but the difference is often usually only about 1%. So the men are trailing them, but the women usually do have the titles. And I've sort of thought about this, and I think it's quite interesting. Women do have higher body fat, and so that may make them more buoyant, for example. So there could be some reasons why that's the case, but it is quite interesting. That's the one sport, as far as I'm aware, where women tend to maintain the titles.
Right. Yeah. So this
I'd like to mention it as a counterexample.
Absolutely. Yeah. So this kind of begs the question, is there really a reason to watch women's sports? Because now we're talking spectator side, right?
Well, as a non-sport aficionado, I'm probably not the right person to ask there.
Sure, yeah.
I'm not very excited by sport. I have been known, especially when I was younger, to watch cricket. To watch tennis occasionally.
Yeah.
And then it was probably mostly men's tennis, actually.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because one thing that came to my mind is that the only reason one would actually watch such things if they are A, they're virtue signaling, or B, they've got family that does it.
Yep.
That they would actually want to watch.
There was one other reason. There was a guy named Henri Leconte, as he's French, as you might imagine. He was actually quite humorous too on the court, and so a lot of people really enjoyed watching his stuff, because even though he was playing serious tennis, he was also quite funny.
Right.
And then there was an American whose name escapes me now, who was known for his outbursts. You may remember the name. You may know him.
McEnroe?
Yes, John McEnroe.
John McEnroe from tennis. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Yes. And he was entertaining, but for different reasons.
Oh yeah, absolutely. He was just balls to the wall, kind of like. Yeah.
So that was, I probably, to be honest, watched a lot for Henri Leconte's antics more than anything. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, because this kind of leads into conservatives now, because before we kind of got into the whole biological men and women's sports issue, we were making fun of, rightly so, the whole equal pay thing that what was her name? Rapinoe, I think it is. That soccer player, that female soccer player, the pink-haired one. Is something that
go on.
Yeah. Just basically, so you can tell how versed I am on this thing, because I don't really watch sports either. But it's just the stuff surrounding. Like, it was a couple of years back, surrounding the discourse. It's basically just screaming about the equal pay thing, and we were rightly kind of making fun of this kind of stuff. If you want equal pay, generate a better audience.
That's exactly right. That's my view. If you can demonstrate you're bringing an audience in, then by all means, you should get paid commensurate with that.
Right. But now the conservatives are full-on defense mode of women's sports, because their precious women are being hunted down, or not hunted down, but are targeted by these biological men entering and like out competing them.
And I think it really proves the point that we've been arguing for a number of years, which is traditionalism is gynocentric in its own way.
Exactly.
It's different. Yeah, it's different to feminist gynocentrism, but it's still there. And I think it's really, back then it was more subtle, but now it's very much, as you say, very much out in the open. Yeah. So I actually did hear one comment. It was just some comment I saw on a Twitter or something like that. And I did think it was quite funny, though. Somebody suggested that maybe women's sports should have male and female categories. I thought that was quite cute.
Well, let's see which category gets the most views.
Exactly. That's right.
Right.
Yes. So now I did have that. Now let's go with the. I tend to have lots of browser windows open.
Sure, yeah. Well, while you're looking for that next thing, I'll comment also that this is what I meant about the first reason for watching women's sports is virtue signaling, because it's that's the only way you're going to get this audience, because they have to have this duty to watch women's sports because they're underrepresented or something. You're not in there for the pleasure. You're in there to be a white knight.
Yeah. So I've remembered I found the third school that I just wanted to quickly mention, just to close out that topic. It's called Parkdale Secondary College, and I'm making a point of saying the names of each of these schools. So, I've actually got some work to do on the Wiki for Men articles on all their schools, but I think I'll wrap those up in the near future. Parkdale Secondary College was the third of the schools that we had in quick succession that had something misandric come up. And in this case, a youth worker forced year 11 male students at a co-ed public school to stand up in front of the class and while she condemned them as historical oppressors because they are white, male, and Christian. What is particularly notable is this youth worker was being contracted by the local city council to do this. Yes. And it seems that after this happened, some of the school administration was kind of claimed to have been a bit shocked about all this and didn't expect that to happen. So, of course, and it isn't clear whether they've had any more of those sessions since. But anyway, so we had three schools in Australia that did the same thing as something similar to what happened in the school in Belgium. So this is not, unfortunately, unique.
Right. Now, you said that there's some backlash from the parents for one of them.
Yes, several of them actually. I think probably all of them actually. There was some backlash from the parents, and the school. It's usually the school administration claimed ignorance, usually, and the parents. There was some pushback, but you often don't see much more in the media. So I think these are issues I'll actually dig into. And now we're a couple of years later, and I'll see what other sort of discussions have gone on. One of the schools, I think, blocked their Facebook page for a week or two before bringing it back again because they were getting so much negativity. You do see people calling this stuff out, but we don't see people organising in the way that I would like them to. As I say, that the silent majority needs to be a bit less silent. People don't back us I think it would be. I think there'd be some justification for them doing. They don't organise other efforts. There's a lot of people who are quite happy to complain about stuff, but they don't take the next step and really try to do something about it, unfortunately.
Yeah. I was about to comment that I'm just surprised that protests complaints were happening altogether at all.
Right. I see a lot of complaints online when, for example, if you watch any sort of woke post, there will often be jokes about it. Another one is the European Central Bank. So there's one. I didn't have it on my list, but I probably should bring it up. The European Central Bank made a tweet regarding, I don't know if you saw this, Vernon, I think about equity, not equality, which of course is terminology. Yeah. So feminists over the last 5 years have shifted largely from talking about equality to talking about equity, which is really equality of outcome. When they say equity, that's really what they mean. But notably, the European Central Bank made a quote on this subject. And anyway, they got a lot of negative comments. And that's what I do tend to see, even on news sites and so forth. There's a lot of people who are prepared to sort of mock them when they say these things. Yep. But I feel like it's time more people took the next step and got involved. If you don't want to support us, support some other group that's talking about these things and or do small donations or whatever. It seems to me there are a lot of people out there who are talking about who realize there's a problem, but they're not stepping up at all. And I think it's time people need to.
Exactly. Now I want to comment on equity. You said that was equality of outcome, basically. So
yes.
So the tricky thing about equity is that depending on the person, this could be the meaning can be kind of twisted, or the intent also can be kind of twisted, because we tend to think of at least to the untrained mind, I suppose. Sorry, this is kind of being a bit hubristic, but Christina Hoff Sommers alleges to be for not for equality of outcome and actually trying to be fair, like meritocracy, but she calls herself an equity feminist. So what does she mean by equity then? Because so I think meanings get confused with these people, and I don't think that's a good thing.
No, I agree. In fact, feminists had tended to be quite evasive on definitions. I've spent quite a lot of time looking for the way that the feminists will define the terms that they use, and it can be quite difficult, actually. My view is that they've become a little bit more concrete in the last few years, in the last sort of 5 years or so, and as a result of that, they're actually a little bit easier to target now. So I am finding that they're making more concrete definitions, which is good for us. Whether that comes from, I'm not quite sure why they're doing that. It could be that actually they're more confident now, or they've just lost the knack of being evasive. I'm not quite sure why, but they are doing it, and I actually do think that's making our job a little bit easier. But yes, you're quite right. There's still a lot of twisting of definitions that go on. And it's good to mention Christina Hoff Sommers, actually, because that's right. She's written books on the state of boys and so forth in society, but at the same time, her position is quite different to ours. She's still Chronocentric, and she's still a feminist. She calls herself a feminist, and that is absolutely. I will absolutely agree with her if she is a feminist.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even though, from a feminist point of view, she may be more moderate, but yeah,
a little bit more. But yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, you'd be surprised at how much of the status quo she really kind of buys into, and she's kind of friends with. So
That's right. Exactly. That's right. So I think and I've said we do sometimes reference her research, and she's got ideas into the minds of people that perhaps she's been a good vector for getting some of that information out there. But in the end, yes, that's right. She's a feminist, and she's still
I kind of want to comment on the fact that she's basically this person. The reason everybody kind of freaks out when you talk smack about her, because Paul Elam's done brilliant videos exposing Christina Hoff Sommers, as far as I'm concerned. But it's the fact that here's this woman who is on the old side that's dispensing support for us men, but because that's something they kind of want to cling on to, right? Because they're not confident as men to speak up as much, or so they say, why waste a good thing? But the problem is it's not really a good thing. It's just swinging it the other way around on the gynocentrism scale. So
exactly, I think this is why we do get this a lot, and there's been a discussion recently with a video that was posted on A Voice for Men, and some people actually in the comments weren't happy about that. But in this particular case, the person in the video was talking about important issues, and so we posted it. We do get quite a lot of pushback on the way we approach things at times, but we're trying to I think stay the course and get to the I think have our eye on the prize and get to the end. There's a lot of people who are they're talking about boys' issues. It's not just Christina Hoff Sommers. A lot of other people are talking about them too, but they're quite gynocentric in their approach.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. Right. Because the reason, so I've said this before here or somewhere else, but the reason why I'm always on conservatives' asses so much is because compared to liberals, they speak more truths, right? I think, personally. And that's why when they speak flagrant insanity, like defending male genital mutilation and etc., because that seems to be the big one for me, and it is. And they carry truths but smuggle in the worst of lies. So that's why this is a dangerous combination. So we can't keep on buying everything that we can't see them as saviors.
That's right.
Just because we agree on a few things.
Exactly. The people in A Voice for Men have been aware of this, and we did talk about it, but perhaps should have been more vocal about it. But in the last few years, I do think we've been vocal about it, and I think I'm quite happy that it was something that A Voice for Men was talking about before a lot of people realised what was going on. I think we have been leading there.
Absolutely.
So it was Tucker Carlson. The video was Tucker Carlson, so we encourage people to look at the video without me trying. I won't summarize it. Encourage people to look at the video, but some people don't like him, and I'm personally not much of a fan of Tucker Carlson either. But in this particular case, it was worth posting that video and letting people listen to it.
Yeah, he strikes me as just another TradCon leaning type. Yeah.
Exactly. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Right.
So the next, I don't know if you had anything that you want to move on to, but the next issue I had is a gentleman by the name of Boyan Slat. Now, I hope I'm pronouncing his surname okay. He's from the Netherlands, I think. Let me just.
It sounds like a Dutch name.
Yes, he is indeed from the Netherlands. So it's kind of interesting. So Greta Thunberg really did nothing except complain, really, and take time off school. And I have to say, too, it's a little bit of a divergent, but I'm not very impressed by school students taking time off school to protest the environment during the week, because I was a good student and I would have taken any opportunity to take time out of school. And that's speaking of someone who was doing well in school, most students will take time out of school. So I'm not too impressed by the student protests during the week. You show me a bunch of kids from high school protesting on a Saturday, and I'll be impressed. But they always do it in the school week. Anyway.
Oh, during the time that they're supposed to have off,
Exactly. If I'm not impressed by school kids protesting during the school day. Show me them protesting on the weekend or the holidays, and I'll be impressed. Right. Greta Thunberg was, I think, initially taking every Friday off school or something along those lines, and ended up being quite well known worldwide. really, all she's done is complain, quite frankly. All she does is complain a lot. Boy and Slut, in contrast, at the same age, he started this project. He was very disturbed by plastic in the ocean, which is a very serious issue.
I think I know who you're talking about.
He decided to do something about it, and he's actually developed a series of prototypes, and he's been doing this quite a number of years now. And he's got systems that do a very good job of cleaning plastics out of the ocean. Essentially, it forces them to collect in one location where someone can then come along and clean it up. And still system's still not perfect, but they're getting there. And he's actually been doing something.
Right.
Boyan has had very, very little public exposure. He has received some awards and there has been some public exposure, but in contrast, Greta Thunberg has been nominated for the Nobel Prize 4 times. So why don't we nominate Boyan or something like that? Let's give him some more. Everyone should be talking about him. He should be at least as famous as Greta, and he isn't. And I think it really talks about the issues.
Well, he's a threat to Greta because he's getting rid of the very problem that she wants to complain about. She'll be out of a job.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And this is, of course, the problem we see with the domestic violence industry as well. They are incentivized for the problem to continue, because that's the gravy train. If you actually fix the problem, they'd have nothing to complain about, and the money would dry up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Boyan's out there doing a really good job and trying to actually fix the problem. And yes, some people have been critical because there've been problems with prototypes and so forth. Well, that's the way these things work. And he's been working at it now for I think about 10 years, and is getting something that's really working well. So. Exactly. Hopefully, he's a young guy too, so he's got plenty of time ahead of him. Hopefully, I think he'll really achieve great things.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but people hardly even know about him. So I wanted to mention his name in this show, and I think I'd like to mention him, periodically going forward as well in various forums.
Let's be sure to include a link in YouTube. Yeah.
Absolutely. I've given him a page on Wiki for Men under the category "What Men Do."
Okay. Yeah. But be sure to remind me because I'll need to. Yeah.
Yes, no problem at all.
Right.
Next one I have is Caitlin Olsen, and I'm not interested in sports like yourself. I don't know if you've ever heard of Caitlin Olsen before, but I can say categorically I had never heard of Caitlin Olsen before. So Caitlin Olsen is an actor, apparently, and I think she's got a Wikipedia page, and I think may actually be reasonably well known by this
a lot person. Of people. I think most people know her from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I never watched the show. I'm just aware of it because sometimes it's a memeable type of show, but not for her probably, but for other reasons.
Yes, no, fair enough. So anyway, she's doing a movie at the moment, and she was interviewed in relation to this movie. And even if she's joking, and I don't think the statements were a joke, she essentially claimed to have been bullying a co-worker. She was basically saying that she was intimidating a male actor, Woody Harrelson, who of course is well known. Yeah. But really, or if you actually read what she said, all she was doing is bullying a co-worker, which is actually illegal in a lot of places and certainly wrong. And she was proud of this, and the article was playing it up as if she'd done something great. Very disturbing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. Jump in if you got any items there. Otherwise I'll just go on to my next one.
Okay. Well, So Peter Wright gave us a bit of a tip-off the other day. We've got somebody writing a paper on us and citing our works, and as part of some weird course on men's rights, or at least lying about men's rights, and probably what it is. Yeah, do you recall? We both read a little bit. I've kind of skimmed over it a bit, but I wonder if you read it at all.
So I haven't had a chance to read the whole thing properly. I read the bits that talked about some of us. So basically, it's an academic paper that was written, I think actually, was it a few months ago or last year or something? It might have been last year. Peter Wright picked it up Yeah, I think it may have been a few months ago. Anyway, Peter Wright picked it up and he searched for our names, and so we've Peter Wright's been so anyway, he found quite a few people in our groups cited in this article, in this paper. So Peter himself gets cited quite a lot by feminists in their academic papers. I think I've had a couple. I think this is the second or third. And it was really very cool. See you in there, Vernon. So let's get you cited in some more feminist papers. I'm sure that'll happen going forward. Quite a number of other people as well, Steve Brulé and various other people that we know. It's interesting. I mean, I disagreed with the premise of what was put into the paper. Whether I may write a response article or I may not, haven't decided yet, actually, whether it's worth it. But it's interesting. I mean, feminists do watch what we're doing, and I think I did mention this in a previous episode. I actually made a mistake in an article once, and an academic turned up in the comments pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. And even though I hate making mistakes on these things, it was annoying that I made a mistake in the article. It was actually probably worth it because it was quite insightful to see what happened and how this academic who didn't have a Discus account. We use Discus as a voice for men. It didn't have a Discus account, created a Discus account and started posting in the comments pretty quickly. Right. So on balance, I think it was worth it to have made the mistake, just to have lurked there about the fact that how they're watching.
Yeah.
No. But yes, it's interesting that this one actually has mentioned quite a lot of people. I think probably a dozen people or more that we know were mentioned in this paper.
Right. Yeah. Well, it was very editorial heavy for a research paper, wasn't it? Used a lot of really, how do you call it, colorful language. I don't mean cursing, but like you brought up something. It was this weird group.
That's right.
Groupuscular. Is that the word?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I had to look it up too. It is a legitimate English word.
It is? Okay.
Yeah, it is. And it essentially means a member of a small political movement, especially extremists. That's the meaning. Yeah, and yes, but what was funny was this academic, I didn't actually count how many times the academic used this word. I probably should go through and count, but I just did a search on the paper and quickly found about half a dozen, and it was still seemed to be going. So I think this word gets used quite a bit in the article, probably in the paper, probably a little too much. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it seemed a bit inappropriate to me in the sense that an academic paper is meant to be a bit dispassionate.
Yeah.
And this one wasn't. But as one commenter pointed out that I saw in one of our private chats, that's increasingly the tendency with academic papers. They're having less and less of an academic tone, at least in this area.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, glad you mentioned that. It's nice. It's in the sense that I like that they're looking at our stuff, even though they're critical. It means they're still looking, and I think that's a good thing. And they're going to. So I refer to feminists as the marketing department.
Yep.
And that's because a fairly high proportion of people who end up involved with men's rights actually first heard about it as a result of feminism. Mm-hmm. And they can't help themselves. This is where I can quite openly admit this. They have to talk about this stuff. And when they do, a proportion of people will look at our sites, and a proportion of those people will stay, and a proportion of those people will end up helping out. And I'm one of those people. I first heard about the men's rights movement from feminists, and I looked at A Voice for Men, and I agreed with what I saw, and I had been aware of a lot of the issues, but I realized the issues were more serious than I had previously understood them to be, and I ended up staying and getting involved.
Right.
So, thanks, feminists.
Yeah. Like thanks for the free publicity. Right.
Exactly. That's thanks right. Thank you for the free publicity. Thanks.
Right. But since you brought that up, it's not quite exactly the same way in my case, but it was partly so. I think it was Christina Hoff Sommers complaining about Paul Elam and A Voice for Men at the time, where we're not like them or something like that. Well, thanks, you've just advertised A Voice for Men to me.
There you go, the marketing department.
Right, yeah, right. So, but that was partly it. Obviously, otherwise, it's been through Karen Strawn and Honey Badger Radio and everything like that. That's right. The other way I got got an awareness of them. So
yeah, I went the other way. So I looked at A Voice for Men after having heard about it from feminists and wondered what this men's rights thing was all about. And then learned about Honey Badger Radio and all the rest after that. So yes.
Right. Well, they take these feminists, they take reasonable things about the men's rights movement, which we are reasonable. Everything about it is. I'm just saying any given point, and saying and then saying that men's rights people are idiots for saying this. They're really against this sort of thing. It's not about us being extremists. They really want our rights to be gone and be more diminished than it is.
Absolutely, and they're pushing for that. And sometimes, the recent post by the European Central Bank was perfect, where they said equality isn't enough. In fact, I was going to read the post. I will just bring it up briefly, and I will read it because a lot of people were shocked by this. A lot of people were shocked by this. But because they're not in the broader community, because they're not used to this sort of thing. But it didn't surprise me at all. It was simply one of the more open expressions of a trend that's been going on in feminism for a number of years. So I'll read the tweet. This was on International Women's Day. Equality is no longer enough. Today, on International Women's Day, we need to take it a step further and embrace equity. This means not just giving women the same opportunities, but exactly what they need to succeed. We support #IWD by striking the embrace equity pose, and then they show a series of women with this pose, which is essentially their arms wrapped around themselves. This shocked some people, but it was quite overt compared to what we probably have seen. But the sentiment is this has been core feminism for at least 5 years, and there it is.
Part of me wants them to keep on doing that because women are going to realize that they're being condescended with luck.
Absolutely,
that's
I agree. An increasing number of women are actually absolutely. So I'm like yourself. I'm anti-censorship fundamentally, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, in addition to that, I don't want feminists to be censored, even if I was not otherwise anti-censorship. I don't want feminists to be censored because I've said feminist words are the most powerful words we have. We should be listening to what feminists are saying, and people should be taking that in and understanding what it is they're really saying and responding to that. Because if you actually sit down and listen to what they're saying and what leading feminists are saying, I think most reasonable people would be really shocked. So let's not censor feminists. Let's not to cancel them at all. Let's get them speaking, and everybody should listen to what they're saying.
Right. Yeah. And alongside that, let's get out the truth about it through Janice Fiamengo's videos, our videos,
absolutely,
everything.
That's right. That's right. And if you want to know about the men's rights movement and you don't believe what other people say, come and look at the sites. Come and look at A Voice for Men, which you can't do on Facebook because it's banned. But on Twitter and other sites, you can still look at A Voice for Men. By all means, do so and judge for yourself. And if you find something that you think is untrue, then say it. If you find something that you find to be objectionable and you disagree with, say that too.
Right.
We're all about free speech and evidence-based conclusions. And if you see something wrong, as I said, mistakes have been made. I made one myself in that article I mentioned. Not too often, actually, fortunately. There was another one that A Voice for Men made a few years ago, around about the time I was getting involved. It published some data which was not true, and it was actually MRAs who called them out on it. And a retraction was published. Because humans make mistakes, this happens, but we're trying to be honest. Unfortunately, as I said, relatively few mistakes have been made, unlike feminists, where it really is a constant vague statements that can be interpreted in different ways and so forth. And,
right. Yeah. Well, that's the more sensationalist way to get an audience, right? The scare.
Exactly. Yeah. I call myself an extreme moderate. So.
Right.
Yeah. The last item I've got is Extinction Rebellion UK. It's just a quick one. I wrote an article called The Naked Truth a few years ago where it's a serious article, but I wrote it in I guess it's a little light. It's talking about the tendency of feminists to strip naked, because the feminists really do have a bit of a habit stripping naked at the
Right.
first opportunity. Femin is a classic one. Femin was founded by a man, by the way. So Femin was originally founded in Ukraine by a man. I think he's French, the man. Originally, the Ukrainian women, the original women were Ukrainian. However, now I think it's based in France and it's multinational. They went around shocking people by stripping naked or going topless or whatever. But it's quite common, and they're trying to shock people. But it's become a bit, in my view, it's become a bit silly and a bit of a laugh, actually, because they do it so often.
It's blasé now. It's like it's nothing we haven't seen anymore.
Exactly, that's right. And having women stripped off with writing on their chest. Oh yeah, it's been done to death. They've just done it again. Extinction Rebellion UK has just popped out and done this one where they had a bunch of women who were topless and talking about the environment. And I just posted my article and saying basically, again, really? And I'll be sure and include that one in a future article. It's a bit silly at this point. So naked feminists are pretty common.
Well, yeah, absolutely. It's like, where was I going with this? It's like just pattern of repetition, insanity, basically.
That's right.
Keep thinking it's actually working, but it's weird that they're calling it Extinction Rebellion. You said this was like a climate protest group.
Oh, not sure if you've heard of Extinction Rebellion before, but
I don't think so.
Oh, okay. They've been pretty big here in Australia, so we know them well. They've been causing problems like they'll glue themselves to the Sydney Harbour Bridge in peak hour, that sort of thing, which of course causes a bunch of people to be stuck in traffic with their cars on, releasing petroleum fumes into the atmosphere. So, but it's been here in southeast Queensland. They've been quite big. They were for a few years causing a series of problems. There was a young woman by the name of Emma Dorge, who's actually mentioned on Wiki for Men. She was a leading proponent of these movements, and at one point, she actually lost her job at one point because she claimed to have been sick and was busted at one of these. Her employer saw her on TV, I understand, or something along those lines, at one of these protests. And she reported in sick and lost her job at one point. But she's still active. But she hasn't been as active, but she hasn't been as visible since that. But she's still active. You do see her appearing. Extinction Rebellion is quite big here, which is probably why I wasn't at all surprised when I saw it. Another place they're big is the UK, which is where this recent protest occurred. They had another protest a while back where they were on the subway trains. The underground trains are in the UK and London, and they were causing problems there and stopping the trains from moving and so forth. But it's not a feminist group, but they are tied to feminist groups. They do express a lot of feminist aligned ideas, and tend to repeat these sort of things of stripping naked and so forth.
I was just thinking about the name and the fact that it's a climate protest group, because my experience with environmentalists is that they tend to be rather misanthropic. Basically, some of them go as far as saying that human extinction is the way to save the environment. So,
that's right.
What are they protesting the extinction of?
You're absolutely right.
And if they're feminist aligned, they're probably abortion activists too, depending on who it is.
Yeah.
So, destroying reproduction is a fantastic way to save the human species, right?
Yeah. That's a really good point you're making about a lot of people don't realize that there's a minority of environmental activists that want the human species to go extinct in order to survive, in order to benefit the environment, right. Which is interesting because we ourselves are part of the environment. We're just another species that's evolved on the planet Earth. So why should we be the ones who have to go extinct? But anyway, my sense, and I don't claim any sort of authority on this at all, but my sense is that component of environmentalism is growing in numbers and power within the environmental movement. They seem to be more prominent than they were 10 or 20. They've been around a long time, but more prominent than they were 10 or 20 years ago. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's certainly my sense. It's quite concerning. Yeah. And I don't think a lot of people know about that, and I think they should.
Right.
And I guess, go on.
And well, one bit of information I I believe I believe I'm getting this right, is that the founder of Greenpeace back in the day, started Greenpeace for environmental concerns strictly, right? But but he realized that he broke from the organization because he was realizing that the movement was becoming more anti-capitalist and basically just going after corporations for the sake of going after corporations, and basically just trying to tie government regulations into everything, right?
And in actual fact, they've dropped it from their website now because they got a lot of pushback even from other environmentalists. But originally, Extinction Rebellion Southeast Queensland, where I live, had three core aims that were of an environmental nature. Okay, I would say it's still pretty extreme, but they were of an environmental nature. And they very quietly added a fourth one, decolonisation. So decolonisation is a word that you're seeing. I don't know if you're seeing it in the US so much, but you're seeing it in Australia and Canada and New Zealand as well, where it's essentially talking about things like native sovereignty, which would that would give more power to Indigenous communities and enshrine them in law. And for example, there's going to be a referendum here in Australia about something called the Voice that will apparently be although they're vague on the powers. But it would maybe some sort of veto over legislation by Indigenous groups. Exactly who gets to be on this Indigenous group that's got this veto, this sort of thing isn't very clear. But this is all to do with decolonisation, and this is something that Extinction Rebellion, we saw from Extinction Rebellion South East Queensland, that's something that they want. And after they got the pushback from the other environmentalists, I noticed they took down their website and they haven't mentioned it again as far as I've seen. But this is something that I think is at their core, and it comes back to what you're talking about, that anti-capitalist component, rather than it being about the environment.
Right. So are they okay for a purely Caucasian Europe then? Because, the Caucasian had to come from somewhere.
I think they're quiet on that issue. You would think that's right. If that was really their aim, then surely the Indigenous community of Europe would be Caucasians or Celts or something like that. But I think they've been pretty quiet on that issue. And next chance I get, I may ask them that exact question. I've asked the questions before; they don't answer my questions. But I'll answer that question. Actually, I like that one. Yes,
absolutely.
Yes, I thought of that one. That's good. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Extinction Rebellion. Yes, I don't think they're as big in the US, but Australia and the UK, they're a big deal. Well, they have been a big deal, and in the sense that they've managed to shut down Sydney roads many times and all those sorts of things. Fantastic. And I just want to add one last point too about this, that I'm actually all for sustainability. I have been since I was a teenager. Sure. I think we should be moving towards efficient recycling technologies and using sustainable, because I don't want, this is just my general mindset, is if I'm consuming resources, I want the same thing I'm doing to be something people in 1,000 or 10,000 years, they should be able to live at least as well as I do. And that naturally brings about sustainability, given that fossil fuels are a non-renewable resource and so forth. So I am all for this, but my ultimate aim is to, and this is why I'm involved in men's rights too, minimize human misery. That's ultimately my aim, right? So I want to see us transition towards sustainable technologies in a manner that does not minimize human misery. But Extinction Rebellion want to see Australia transition to fully renewable energy production by 2025. They said this in 2020. Now, that would cause outages of electricity regularly. It would cause a reduction in the standard of living, and it would increase human misery. And that's why I oppose it.
Well, the problem with the environmental discourse is that it's going forward completely on faith and quota, and basically the idea that we've got to get here by any means necessary, and any means necessary means probably more pollution than just burning fossil fuels, because I love the idea of electric cars, right? But the way we're going about them right now, that with the mining and everything and the processing, it's much, the creating of these electric cars are much worse, is my understanding. Is that right?
There's problems with the cobalt production, and this is a problem that we see. Mining in Africa is a heavily unregulated industry, and there's a lot of slavery in Africa and a lot of child exploitation and child slavery in Africa. And cobalt mining is one of those areas that's being used for the batteries. And this is a problem. I mean, companies that are doing this, they could try to audit their supply lines, but as far as I know, they're not doing that at this stage. They could try to audit their supply lines and see that there are fair work conditions right down the line. That would probably significantly increase their costs, and they're not doing it at the moment, probably because there isn't enough demand from the public, unfortunately. But yeah, you're right, it is a problem. Also, there's problems with cobalt, with even getting recycling of the cobalt. I think there are ways of recycling it, but I think it's quite difficult at the moment. So, I tend to think we'll get there, but eventually. But yes, for the moment, these are ongoing problems.
Right.
Yeah, and yes, I'm the same. I actually like the idea of electric cars, and I remember saying this to people when I was a teenager. I love the idea of no pollution in cities. I think I would love to live in a city that didn't have any petroleum producing vehicles. That would be great.
Well, one thing that's popping immediately to mind right now is the subject of solar cars. And every time I think of solar cars, I think Australia, because they always talk about like running like solar cars in Australia. Is it just the sun? Is it a good place for the sun, or?
We do have, very high number of days with sunshine, as they say. It's funny, it's great irony that Germany is one of the leading countries in the world for solar technology, and of course it doesn't have that much sunshine. Australia is shifting towards renewables. Australia is quite its nickname. I don't know if you've ever heard this. Its nickname is actually the Lucky Country, and that nickname goes back about, well, I don't know if it's 100 years, but it goes back many, many decades. It was one that was already old by the time I was born in the 1970s. People actually kind of stopped using it in the last couple of decades, and I actually think, if anything, it's probably more true than ever. Australia is essentially sitting on a massive uranium reserve. It's got now the world's largest uranium reserve. I don't know if it started with the largest. It started with one of the largest, but because the other countries have been mining it and Australia hasn't, it's got one of the largest uranium reserves. Those are hot rocks, right? You can pump water down into them and get steam up, geothermal energy.
Yeah.
Right. So Queensland, the state I live in, is basically sitting on a bunch of hot rocks, and geothermal energy is something that we're not exploiting at all. So what I'm getting at, I guess, going a long way around, is to come back to your question, that there's a lot of energy options in Australia that we're not currently exploiting because the country is so rich in energy sources. The country is oil poor. It has very limited oil reserves, but that's one of its very few natural resources that it doesn't have in abundance. The country's got, we could basically go full tilt with coal mining for hundreds and hundreds of years before we had any sort of shortage at all. So I mean, I'm talking about the maximum level that has been used. They're talking about hundreds of years of reserve coal, and we've stopped coal mining, or largely stopped coal mining up to this point. So those reserves are still there, and you've got the geothermal on top of that. So Australia has not shown as much interest in solar. We'll purchase solar panels from other countries and use them, but there hasn't been a lot of onshore solar development. I think more green technology is growing. I've probably been quite a long spiel there, but I think there are a number of green technologies that are probably going to be more prevalent over the next 5 or 10 years, but I don't think it's necessarily going to be solar. So,
right.
Yeah.
What are the obstacles of solar?
So interestingly, I do like solar panels as a part of a mix of renewable and non-renewable technologies. I'm quite happy for solar panels to be able to buy solar panels and put them on their roof. So solar panels when I was younger, I didn't actually realize this, but solar panels only work for about 25 years, which I find really interesting. You'd think, with being a solid state technology and a series of layers spliced together, you'd think they'd pretty much work forever, but they don't. They only work for about 25 years. And as of at least a few years ago, they took about 10 years to pay back their own production costs. So if you build a solar panel, it's a net negative for about 10 years. As long as that solar panel, after 10 years, it breaks even. And as long as it lasts for more than 10 years, it's a net win for the environment. However, solar panels are difficult to recycle at the moment. And I've heard some pretty nasty stories, a bit like with the cobalt mining, but pretty nasty stories of unregulated industries in Southeast Asia and Asia poor people are getting exposure to really nasty chemicals as they're trying to take these things apart. So that's a problem. But it seems to me that if you've got a problem, we've got a resource which is running out. Okay, the oil is running out. We're crushing up shale, and we're digging up tar sands and all sorts of things. We have to find another solution. I think that solar panels, even with their negatives, I quite like them as part of the mix, because even though there is a price to pay, you have taken the pressure off that non-renewable resource. So I'm quite happy to see that technology advance along with other technologies.
Right, yeah. And I'd love to see that kind of technology advance too. It's just, it's like a good idea that's being kind of rushed out so that the market can't keep up with it. Basically.
Yeah,
it's either too expensive, or they have to do something ridiculous like slavery to make it happen. Some demand side problems, I think.
It will be a fantastic technology once. Yes, we are in the early stages of it. And I suppose you could probably say that was true with others. The Industrial Revolution, they started using fossil fuels. They did all sorts of terrible things, and ended up with acid rain and all sorts of things. They got there in the end, and I'm sure we'll probably have fully recyclable solar panels at some point in a few decades. I don't mind wind farms, actually. Some people say they're ugly. I actually think they look quite nice, actually, with the fans going around. And I understand there's some birds that die, but probably not that many from what I've seen. But I'm in favour of a mix of technologies, and that we transition to renewables in a manner that doesn't result in as I said, increased human suffering and a loss of standard of living.
Lots to think about.
Yeah. So I've even known people who said it was terrible that we used fossil fuels at all, but I say no.
Oh no,
we needed them. It gave us a boost. There's been extraordinary advancement in that time. The population of the Earth is so much greater than it was. Now we've reduced infant mortality and so forth. And I think it's a transition phase, and I'd like to see us move on to cleaner technologies.
Absolutely. And volcanoes produce much more carbon dioxide than a lot of us.
That's a good point, actually. And the hole in the ozone layer, that was a big issue in Australia, which was really a thinning in the ozone layer. Are you familiar with that?
Just a thinning of the ozone layer to chlorofluorocarbon.
Yeah, exactly. So, but it turned out the chlorofluorocarbons did have a component, but there was a lot more going on than that. I seem to recall there was a volcano in Antarctica or something that was releasing some chlorine gas at one point. Because one of the great mysteries was why it was in Antarctica, when most of the CFC production was in the northern hemisphere, and the lower atmosphere of the northern and southern hemispheres don't mix much. So it was always a bit of a mystery. And so there were some natural causes. And yes, and by all means, getting rid of the CFC use in the long run was probably a good thing. But as long as we replace it with something reasonable. But it wasn't. It seems to me the major cause, as I understand it, of the hole in the ozone layer. I mean, there were problems in Australia, where southern Australia, the hole would pass over southern Australia, and people would not go outside.
Yeah.
Even though people in the tropics always had lower levels of ozone than you would see in this hole. So
yeah.
We covered a lot of topics after all, didn't we?
We got through a lot, and seamlessly too. So.
Exactly. Thank you very much. Another great episode.
Yeah.
Yes, late here. I think I shall go to bed soon.
Okay. Yeah. And I wish I could go right back to bed, but I got to take my wife to work. So.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. You're getting up for Sunday, isn't it? You're getting up Sunday morning.
Yeah. This is a Sunday morning.
Sunday morning. Well, at least it's Sunday.
And it's been daylight savings time again, so this is like more earlier than I want it to be.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's why we both look tired. So.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. We don't have daylight saving here in Queensland.
Yes, I've noticed.
It messes up the cows. Actually, that's actually the reason. So we've got a lot of dairy farms, and the cows know when to go to milking. And if you change the time, it messes them up for a couple of weeks. And one of the major reasons why we don't have it. I'm not intrinsically against daylight saving, but I dislike the transition because it breaks computers and it breaks people. A lot of people don't know car accidents spike when there are transition changes. That's all around the world. My view is, if you really want the time to change, shift it permanently.
Yeah.
Just shift it once, do one more transition, and then don't do it again.
Yep.
Yeah. The British actually considered it. they were going to go to British summertime. For some reason, they decided not to. Maybe one day they will. But I think it's a great idea. You want more sunshine? Great. Just have one last transition, and then you're done.
Yep. Sounds good.
Yep.
All right.
Thank you, Vernon. I'll talk to you in 2 weeks.
Yeah, sounds good. All right. Talk to you then.
Bye-bye.